Yeah. My name is Hank. I'm with State Parks.
Yeah.
With State Parks, do we include all the visitors that throughout the parks? Do we lump them as one, or we right now have, I think, 46 individual recycling coordinators that report their own?
So the question is, so for parks, I'm not sure your question got picked up. Betty, is the other mic working better than that one? Do we have one that's working better than the other? Okay. How you report has not changed at all. So if you've been, if your headquarters reporting for district offices or things like that, you continue to do that. If you've, if each of your districts or outlying field shops or whatever have been reporting for themselves in the past, you'll continue to do that. So who reports for whom has not changed at all.
Okay.
Does that address your question?
Right. Also, you were saying the diversion from contractors, and whatever is produced. Let's say for parks, lawn clippings, sludge, fire pit ash, and whatnot. You're saying that's not an important thing to pick up as far throughout the year for diversion?
No, I'm not saying that you no longer should divert that by any means. You still should be diverting everything you can. It's just not what we measure anymore.
So on the report, because you were saying that the report, the old AB 75 report, had all that stuff,
yeah,
metal,
how much gas diversion, how much,
all that, grass and whatnot. So they're still reporting. They're still plugging in those numbers.
No. You will say yes instead of 2 tons. Okay. You'll say we are diverting this. We do have programs to address this, this, and this, and this. Okay. We no longer need to see the numbers associated with each individual type of diversion. What we want to say is, bottom line, when we passed, the local jurisdiction diversion mandates and the state agency diversion mandates, the bottom line is we wanted to send less stuff to the landfill. So we finally got around to just measuring what we all cared about to begin with.
Well, for parks, it made it easy for us to include that information on the contract when a contractor came in and said, yeah, this has to be diverted and whatnot.
Do that. Yes, absolutely still do that. And if you want to track those numbers, there's nothing to preclude you from doing that. We just will no longer ask you to report that.
Okay, what about e-waste?
E-waste is not something that can go into the landfill. Okay.
But it generates a lot.
And actually, here's a plug for another thing. We'll be doing, I think it's in May, we're just basically getting it formulated, doing some training on e-waste for state agencies in specific. But it's not something that's allowed to go into the landfill, so it shouldn't be showing up in your disposal. So we're only tracking now what you're actually throwing away in the landfill.
Are you still going to be tracking e-waste disposal? Because I think in the report there is, it's not part of our report, but it's still a tracked.
Yeah, and we probably will continue to track it in some manner. Whether or not I don't think we're going to be asking for actual diversion tonnages associated with it any longer. And we can follow up some if you want to make sure that you're getting the numbers you need. Let's do a few emails and then we'll.
Okay. Would you define modified and the reporting requirements under 1016?
And I always have to look up modifieds. Do you know offhand what it is? I always have to look
200 or less employees and 100 tons of disposal waste.
Okay. So if you have less than 200 employees or less than 100 tons of disposal, you are a modified agency and you can choose to submit an abbreviated report. However, under SB 1016, the report that everybody submits looks a lot like the ones that the modifieds have already been submitting. They haven't been giving us diversion tonnages, and now everybody else won't have to either. Okay, but if you are a modified agency, you already know it probably, and so that hasn't changed. And I'm sorry, the second half of the question?
The reporting requirements, you answered it.
Oh, okay.
Nothing's changed.
So, but modified still do need to report every year. Okay.
Hi, my name is Les, and I'm a recycle coordinator for 2 departments at the Bateson building. We share a cafeteria. Now, what I'm hearing you say is we want to reduce our disposal in half. while I already do a great job diversion. For example, in our disposal, in our waste management bins, let's say half of it is stuff generated from the cafeteria, something I don't have control of, that I can't make them compost or something, which would be a great way to reduce disposal. So it's kind of like I'm fighting something I can't cut in half that's already existing.
Yeah, and we're not asking you to cut in half from where you are today, okay? The diversion requirement of diverting 50% of what goes to landfill has not changed, okay? So your requirement hasn't changed. We're just changing how we actually measure that. So if you've already, say I have no idea what your diversion rate was, but let's say it was at 80%, okay? We're not asking you to cut in half the 20% that you're still throwing away. We're not asking you to do that. What we're doing is asking you to still maintain at least 50% diversion, okay, which means 50% disposal. And you've already been challenged by trying to figure out how much of this waste is our waste, how much of this waste is their waste. I don't have any control over half of these things. That's a challenge that a lot of agencies have already had, especially since so many of us are in shared buildings. And, you know, Cal EPA, we're kind of lucky because different departments, but all a pretty environmental mission. It's been a little bit easier for us, but we still have our challenges. If you're lumped in with some other agency or, you know, non-state entity, that challenge is a little tougher. But it's a challenge we've always had. And SB 1016 doesn't necessarily make it any easier, but it didn't make it any harder either. So does that address your question mostly? Not really? Yeah, I mean, pretty much. It doesn't, SB 1016 is not asking you in any way, shape, or form to change your program implementation. That all stays the same. Okay?
Deborah, we have an email.
Okay, email question?
We are a fairground with multiple events every weekend and satellite wagering 5 days a week. Are we going to now give you a total of all people who use our facility in a 1 year period?
You will give us the number of employees that you have, okay, which you've already been reporting to us. So that number does not change. What you've already been submitting, we will continue to get. If you are giving us an alternate number of, say, number of visitors or things like that, that you've already been giving us, you'll continue to give us that. If you haven't been giving us that number and you feel that it's something that would be instructive for our staff to know so that we have an additional factor to consider when we're looking at your target and your annual rate, then that's something that they can work on with their land representative to get that included. Okay. And then, do you have a mic? Okay. Over here, and then we'll have a question back there. Yep.
Am I correct in assuming that business source reduction will still be a number used in the new report?
It won't be a number. It'll be a check in a box. So we'll say, are you doing business source reduction? And in the past, the way you told us yes was to put the number of tons that you've diverted through that activity. Now you'll just say, yep, we've been doing that. And we'll be asking for some additional narrative to tell us about your programs. But that's where it gets a little bit easier, and we can, tons are great, but they're not always instructive. Why that much? And that's where we were kind of lacking before. Now we'll have a little bit more information to tell us what's really going on with that diversion program and how it's all manifested of how well all your diversion programs are doing is that bottom line. How much are you still throwing away in the trash?
Thank you.
Okay, and then a question in the red.
My name is Jim Greco. I'm an independent consultant. I work primarily with jurisdictions. And my question pertains to, it's my understanding that with jurisdictions, cities, towns, and counties, that their disposal that's reported comes from the disposal reporting system.
Right.
Am I correct that with state agencies, it's really what the agency keeps track of as far as disposal? It's not the DRS?
Correct. Yeah, we don't have a coordinated disposal tracking system like we do for jurisdictions, because the jurisdictions, the way they track it through the disposal reporting system is through what actually goes through the gates at landfills and whatnot. And what agencies throw away is commingled in that waste. Because everything that goes across the scale at a landfill, it doesn't differentiate who generated it within that jurisdiction. So it is agency tracked disposal for state agencies.
Yeah, I don't really have a question other than just clarification. I'm Kent from Department of Mental Health. it sounds like to me that what you're telling us is that we're going to report the amount of people, which you said, our diversion amount, and then the other real
Your
key,
disposal amount.
our disposal
Yep.
amount, excuse me, and our other real key factor is any outstanding programs that we may have done that year that would affect our overall disposal weights, because that's going to be the key for you guys to key in on what's happening and it's making a spike. The other thing I see as a real key to every agency here, and nobody's speaking to this, but our workload doesn't change. It's still critical for each of us to keep our records on diversion and all that, because you guys are going to be monitoring this. If you come out to say, why have your weight spiked, it's in our best interest to show what we're doing and how we're tracking it and what we're diverting, so you have an idea what our programs are about. So we can't just blow off, well, I'm not going to track diversion because I don't have to anymore, I'll just mark yes. I mean, you have to track that stuff so that to quantify what we're doing. So if you come out and you say, why are all of a sudden you spiked, we'll have the information to show you what took place and what we're doing about it.
And that's really up agency to agency to determine exactly what data they need to handle in-house. But that is a good point. You know, your workload is not changing. If anything, we're making it a little bit easier for you to put the focus onto program implementation instead of tracking all these numbers in the manner that we happen to need them. It's up to each agency to determine if they still have a need for that data internally, but that's just not something that we'll be asking for on a program-by-program basis.